Hey everyone, my name's Ethan Opdahl with RJM Music Technology, and today I'm here with Maddi Schieferstein, current guitar tech for John Petrucci of Dream Theater. Hey Maddi, I'm so glad you could Skype with me today. How you doing?
Hey, Ethan, I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Finally get to take some time off from my classes at UCLA and spend some time at home, so it's
Oh,
fantastic.
nice, nice.
Yeah, so you're currently on break from the Dream Theater Astonishing tour then, right?
Yes, I've been home for a week.
Oh, that must be
Exactly a
nice.
week today, yeah. So,
So what were some of your favorite shows and destinations from the latest round of touring?
um, all the shows were good. I think Paris was probably a really good one. Frankfurt, Germany was a really good one from what I
Nice.
remember. And then the second to last one. The venue wasn't so great, but the gig was pretty good. The band played really well. Was Zurich, and then the last show in Luxembourg went really well too. So
Wow.
it was a little stiff at the beginning, I guess, because we were just starting, and the whole new album and the concept and the putting all the pieces together to actually make it into a live show were it was a
Right.
really daunting task. But we got it done and we pulled it off, so it was great.
Well, a lot of exciting stuff's been happening for you guys this time around. We got new amp, new rig, new album, new tour.
A lot of stuff.
You guys got to cruise around at NAMM and have a great time, and just got so much good stuff to talk about. But ever since you showed me those pictures of the new rig at NAMM, I've been dying to hear what that signal chain
Sure.
is, man. Let's get talking about the rig, huh?
Sure. Yeah, let me actually pull that up so I know exactly what I'm talking about. So there's of course with John's Music Man guitars, all of them except the new JP-16 have a piezo pickup system in them.
Right.
So there's actually two separate signal chains that happen within the guitar. And John, because of that, it's a lot easier to use a cable, and it sounds better. In the end, it still ultimately sounds better. So what we do is we run a TRS cable. I guess people would refer to it as a stereo cable, but it's actually not. It's a
Right.
TRS cable, two conductors, two separate paths. So we run the cable to it's a Framtone AB box that Mark Snyder, who used to be John's tech way back in the early days, who used to build all of John's rigs, actually made for John. And it's just it all it is an AB box that allows me to switch between two different guitars, and then it contains the split for the two different pickup systems. So we'll do the piezo first because that's a pretty straightforward, simple signal path. Out of the AB box, go into a an isolation transformer just to be rid of any grounding issues between the two systems. Into the new TC electronic body res pedal, which
Mm-hmm.
is a really really cool pedal. It's got one knob on it, and it does its thing incredibly well. And we have the knob set at 50% blend, and that's it. It sounds perfect.
So what does that do then? That adds some fullness to create a more truly
Yeah,
interesting sound.
it's I guess I'd have to ask the guys at TC exactly how they would word it, but it's essentially I think it's kind of like a filtering thing. So it adds sort of that acousticness,
Mm-hmm.
that the kind of high and low that sort of gets missing out of a piezo system.
Right.
And it's just there's one knob on it, a blend knob, and it's one of the little tiny mini pedals.
Yeah.
So it's super small, and yeah, it sounds great. So out of the body res, it goes into a radial JD48 DI box, which is a phantom powered active DI, and then that sends the signal out to the PA and the monitors. So, and then the front of house guy will put a little bit of reverb on the piezo to his liking. We have a different
Uh-huh.
reverb monitor system that John likes. So, yeah,
Very good.
it's very simple. That's the simple part of the setup. So, and actually, the rest of the setup is pretty straightforward and simple. It
Right.
looks really complicated when you start drawing it out on paper, but it's just imagine everything that I'm going to tell you. You can actually just throw a bunch of pedals on the floor and plug into an amp and put a pedal in the effects loop, and that's it. That's the exact signal,
Right.
right? So
By Petrucci standards, you guys are going super streamlined.
very streamlined, yeah. Very low key
Yeah.
and simplified compared to what we used to do, yeah. So, okay, so the magnetic pickup system, again, the AB box, and we the first thing out of the AB box is an RJM tone saver buffer splitter, which comes in real handy because it's got isolated outputs, and I can send one output into the rig. The other output actually sends a signal down to the tuner on the pedal board. So he can tune straight off the guitar. There's no effects or anything in between the guitar and the tuner. He can just tune silently whenever he wants. It's great. So from the body res into the rig, the first thing we hit is the Dunlop wah system. So now John just came out with his signature wah pedal with Dunlop, the JP-95, right? So his signature wah pedal was essentially we took his rack wah out of the rig with all of his settings, sent it to Dunlop. They took it, miniaturized it, put it into a wah pedal.
Okay.
Sent it back to us, and we said, yeah, that's it. It's perfect. It's great.
Beautiful.
So when it came time to build the rig, I called up Dunlop and I said, hey, you know how you took the rack wah and you shrunk it down into the pedal? I need you to put it back in the rack chassis for the touring rig. It's just, that way I don't have to run 100 feet of cabling back and forth, 50 feet each direction for the wah pedal.
Right.
So that they did. They actually, all the controls are missing on the front of the rack wah that we have in the rig. So everything is fixed and locked exactly to his settings that come in the signature pedal. And then what they did is they took the signature pedal and made me controller pedals. So it's exactly what you would go and buy, the signature pedal, but it's just they put it in a rack chassis for me.
Perfect.
So yeah, and then so out of the wah system, we go into the pedal drawer, and this is where things are exciting and fun and colorful. We use an RJM mini effects gizmo, so you've got 5 true bypass loops, MIDI controlled, and loop 1 is what do we have? Loop 1, the TC electronic hypergravity compressor. So we switched over to that compressor. We thought we'd give it a shot this tour. Then we have a Keeley Red Dirt overdrive pedal. We have a TC Helix phaser. We have the TC Univibe pedal in loop 4. And then loop 5 is, I actually have 2 of John's signature Dreamscape TC pedals, and they're just daisy chained together, and I just manually switch between one or the other. They're set up for 2 different sounds.
Okay, yeah.
So depending on the song, I just go, okay, he needs a flanger on this one, he needs a chorus on that one, or whatever it is. I just open the drawer, push the buttons, and that's it.
And is the compressor always on when he's on a clean channel?
Yes. So the when he goes to a clean channel, the compressor kicks in, and then I have a delay with some reverb on it that also kicks in on the axe effects.
Nice. And the drawer is something that you guys have access to when you're creating MIDI presets, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So it's just like having the pedals on the floor, except it's nicely contained in the rack, and we control it by MIDI. So
fantastic.
And then you can have any combination. And the cool thing about the pedal drawer is you can change out the pedals. Like, oh man, the Univibe's cool, but what about that Dimension C pedal? Let's put that in. So we can swap out to a different sound. I want to try a different overdrive pedal today, or I want to try a different compressor, or I want, whatever it is. So that's the nice thing about the pedals, is it gives you that flexibility to just, swap in a new pedal. They're pretty much all the same size, every brand, and same connections. So you just plug it in and off you go.
And where do you guys go from the pedal drawer?
So from the pedal drawer, then we go to the input of the new Mesa JP-2C signature amp. So yeah, let's get into that one.
We've all been waiting.
Yeah. So, this was a labor of love on Mesa's part and John's part. And I remember we went to the factory one day a couple years ago, and they were working on I can't remember what amp they were working on. It was just about ready to come out, so we were checking those out. And then we had brought a couple of John's vintage C+2C plus amplifiers with us. And we've been going back and forth with Mesa for a while about, simulclass, not simulclass. Can you get some pictures of your amps? And of course, they were in the warehouse, and finally got to them, took some pictures, and all of a sudden the light bulb went on. And went, oh, he likes this version. So way back when the 2C, when the Mark II came out, there were different versions. You had the 2A, the 2B, the 2C, then the C+. And I don't know, there's a lot of, I'm sure there's a place online you can find all the detailed information as to what was changed throughout the versions. But it was an improvement usually every time.
Yeah.
But back then, when you ordered a Mesa amp, you could order pretty much any configuration you wanted. So there's a lot of guys that like the 2C Plus that don't have graphic EQs. There's a lot of guys that like the 2C Plus that it has simulclass power. The particular ones that John likes are the 60-100 watt non-simulclass version.
Okay.
So it's a much harder aggressive sound. And I think that's what the guys in Metallica have as well. They've got the non-simulclass version.
Right.
And of course graphic EQ and everything. So we sat down with the vintage amps at the factory and plugged them in and checked them out. And of course, Doug West is there, who knows everything about Boogie. Randy Smith, who built the things, he's standing there and going, oh wow, okay, that one sounds really cool. Let's aim for that one. So then we sat down and started talking about the feature set, and the one thing that John always didn't like was there was only one graphic EQ. So you had to make a compromise when you were dialing up your sound with one graphic between your rhythm and your lead sound. And he said, well, when I'm in the studio, when I'm doing rhythm, I set it one way, and when I'm doing lead, I'll set it slightly different to get more mid and, more creamy tone. So that was one of the important parts was, can we do it with, can we do two graphic EQs? And so they said, yeah, sure, we can figure that out. Okay, cool. Now can you do two lead channels? Or what would have been called a lead channel in the old amps, which was just the distorted channel. Can you do a clean channel, and then channel 2 and 3 are virtually identical, and I can set up a rhythm sound and a lead sound and switch between them? Because again, that was another compromise where he would set the amp differently when he was cutting leads in the studio. So, but live, you can't go stand there and twist knobs every time you change something. So
you can't. You just look funny.
Yeah, exactly. So, essentially, what came out was that exact feature set: 3 channels, 2 EQs. The EQs were assignable to any channel. And then the one thing that was really, I thought was really important was we should put MIDI on the amplifier to switch all this stuff. Because all the old rigs, on the back of the Mesa amps, there's always these 1/4-inch jacks that you plug in, like the
switching jacks.
Switching jacks, right? So you have to get it some sort of external box to do that. I said, wouldn't it be easier just to build a little MIDI board with that stuff on it, and just now you just plug in a MIDI cable, and it's great. So that feature was added, and I'll tell you what, man, it's great. Wiring up the rig, and you'll see in the pictures how clean and neat it is on the inside. It's just because of a lot of these features. The MIDI, especially now, there's no external boxes, there's no extra cabling, anything like that. It's just MIDI cable in, assign your parameters, and away you go. So
right.
Has the cab clone DI built in, which is a really cool feature. We've been experimenting quite a bit with that live, not in the front of house, in the monitors. We still need to kind of get it settled to John's liking before we can, try it.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of a dry sound, huh?
Well, it's whatever's coming out of the speaker jack is hitting the cab clone. So any effects or anything like that, it's there. But it's much more. The one thing I noticed about it, it's much more in your face compared to a mic'd cabinet because there's no ambience now.
Right.
So it's right there. So it's cool. We just need to work with it a little bit more.
So what inspired the mid boost knob on channel 1 and the push and pull pots for gain and presence on channels 2 and 3?
The mid boost. Is that when you turn up the mid on channel 1 past 12 o'clock? That was Boogie. That was Randy and Doug that came up with that. That was kind of their, I think on the Mark 525, it has that same type of thing, channel 1. So you get more of that, I guess, that tweed overdriven amp sound, right? So that was definitely their thing, and we don't really use that functionality of it. His clean sound is super clean,
right? But
it is cool. Like I'm the kind of guy I like to get just that slight overdrive sound sometimes. So I think it's a really cool feature.
Yeah.
The push pull on the gain and the presence on 2 and 3, that was when we were prototyping the amps and we had prototypes in the studio. I think one of the prototypes they sent us, imagine if you had the knobs pushed in, right? That's what that amp was. And John said, well, it still, my vintage amp still has this aggressiveness that's not there.
Yeah.
So they went, oh, it's because, we tried to make the presence a little more user-friendly, because on the old amps, the presence was really aggressive as well.
Right.
Like, you get up over 4 on those old amps, and it's ripping your head off. So they sent us another prototype with the way the vintage amps were, which John really liked. But it's kind of the end result was, well, why can't we have both? So if you pull the gain out and you pull the presence out, it's exactly like a vintage C+. If you have them pushed in, it's slightly different.
A little bit less in your face.
Well, yeah, it's still in your face though. But like the presence knob, you can turn up more and get I guess it's like I would describe it as a finer setting, right? Whereas if you pull it out, it's like if you get between 10 and 11 o'clock, that's it. Anything above that, and you're just you're gonna shear somebody's ears off. And the gain, I know there's a difference. There's a little bit of shift in the gain, but I don't really hear it myself all that much. I know it's there. I mean, you can hear it when you do it, but it's to John, it's definitely a feel thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, when you're playing the attack and everything.
And there's nights where sometimes he'll go, you know what, let's pull the gain out, pull the presence out. So we do that, and he'll play for a while, and he'll come back and goes, all right, let's push it in. And, we kind of know where to set the knobs, and we'll push him in and set the knobs that way, and he'll go out and play. And it really is kind of a feel thing, especially for him. So, yeah. So that's the push-pull knobs on the amp.
John's got a gain boost preamp circuit built into his guitars now. Is he going to be using that for a bit of a boost on solos and that kind of thing?
Yeah. He'll do that sometimes. The amp has an incredible amount of gain already, like when he goes to a channel. So a lot of times he won't engage a boost, but sometimes he will. He'll either use the one on the guitar or he'll kick on the overdrive pedal, which is pretty much just set as a your typical, just like I like you would set a tube screamer. Just everything's pretty much like straight up the middle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
cool.
It just adds that little bit of something.
So coming out of the JP-2C, where does the signal go next?
All right, so the effects loop of the JP-2C, which is assignable to MIDI, but we have it just hard on all the time. I have an Axe Effects XL Plus. I guess it's the Axe Effects 2 XL Plus unit. So in the rig, I have 2 amplifier heads. I have the top one, which is the main amp. That's where all the tone comes from. The second one is acting as just a power amp because we run in stereo, right? But it's also a spare head. I can just unplug the input, plug into the bottom amp, and I'm set to go. So effects loop send, Axe effects input, Axe effects output left and right back to the 2 amplifier effects returns. And then we also have a set of the old Mesa 2020 Dynawatt power amps.
Oh.
Yeah, stereo 20 watt EL84 power amps. They're great because they're not incredibly loud like a 290 is. Mm-hmm. And they work great for the 112 cabinets I have on stage as wedges, right?
Right.
So the output number 2 of the Axe effects mirrors output 1, feeds the stereo power amp, feeds the wedge cabinets. The Axe effects, of course, is doing all of the delays, reverbs, harmonizers, chorusing. That's pretty much it, actually. We've kind of even dialed the Axe effects down a little bit. John didn't really use a whole lot of effects on the album.
Yeah.
So what they did do, though, mixing, they actually used the Axe effects for the guitar delays when they were mixing the album. So I was able to actually take the delays that they used on the album, plug them into our machine, and that's what he uses live.
Oh, perfect.
So that was a cool thing.
Right, and I feel like this new rig's just going to let John communicate the ideas he had on the album a whole lot better than he ever could have on the Mark V. Because now here's a setup that has his sound right out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 2 graphic EQs. You have MIDI capability, so it's very versatile. And, honestly, we're getting some fan questions.
Sure.
People are asking, is the JP going to be sort of the new amp? I mean, is the Mark V no longer on the table because of how well the JP can do what it does?
Well, we recorded the entire album with the prototype 2Cs. So yeah, it's got his name on it, so it's an extension of him now. That's not to say that we wouldn't bring other amps into the studio to try and get a different sound. I think on the last album we used a Royal Atlantic for one song. We used a Mark V. We used the old C pluses. I can't even remember how many amps we had in the studio. Probably a dozen different amplifiers, all stacked up. Every iteration of Mark Series amplifier there was, and then some. But I think the JP-2C is definitely that's going to be his mainstay amp now. Yeah.
So is the versatility of the JP-2C and the Axe effects a driving factor in the movement away from the monster rigs of the past to something that's a little bit more streamlined and sleek these days?
Yeah. Well, the Axe effects really, when we got on board with that and got everything dialed in, that really cut down the size of the rigs a lot.
Right.
And so it's an incredible box that does, all the effects in it sound amazing. So it works really well for what we're doing. And it works really well for anybody that's using it in whatever fashion that you're using it. So, there's times John's got one at home that has some amp and cab modeling in it, so he can just demo stuff real quick, or if he's playing at night or whatever. When we actually started the writing sessions for the album, before we had a prototype amp, we were using the Axe effects to demo some of the guitar stuff, just for writing. So, it's a great machine, and it's really helped streamline the whole rig. So
you guys use our RJM Mastermind GT controller as the brains of your rig, and so maybe you could just take a second and talk about how all the MIDI switching works, and let us know how the Mastermind GT's been treating you.
Yeah. So we looked at, I guess it was a few years ago, and the last time we talked, I think I told you the story about how the old foot controller blew up.
Yeah.
down in Mexico or something like that.
I'll put a link to that in the video.
Yeah. So, of course, we went on the hunt for a new foot controller. Had seen a demo video of a very early version of the Mastermind GT and thought, wow, that's really cool. I reached out to Ron and Sherry, and next thing you know, I think that the first batch they did was 10 of them or something. They'd sent me one, and within 15 minutes, I had it all set up and programmed enough to make the rig work. So, of course, fast forward a couple of years, and we've gone way deep down the rabbit hole as far as programming goes. At least I think, but it's probably just scratching the surface of its capabilities. So in our rig, I have two pedal boards. I have the one out on stage, and then I have a satellite pedal board that sits on top of the rack backstage with me. There are some moments where I will do some of the effect switching for John, but he handles probably 99% of it. It's just a couple little bits and pieces. So essentially, the pedal board out on stage is the master. It's in charge of everything. So it sends a signal to the rack switches to what it has to switch to, and that's it. There's nothing the bidirectional MIDI thing. The only thing we use that for is for the two pedal boards to talk to each other. The rig does not send information back to the pedal board.
The rig is through MIDI, right? Just MIDI through to each piece of equipment.
I use these little what's the company? MIDI Solutions. They've got a thing called a Quadra, which is just 1 in 4 out MIDI. I use that to feed. I don't really have that many MIDI devices. I've got the 2 amps, an Axe-Fx, and the pedal drawer. So that's the 4 devices.
Right.
So that just feeds out parallel MIDI. Each unit is on its own channel. The 2 heads share the same MIDI channel, but the Meg is on one channel. The Axe-Fx is on its own channel. The amps are on its own channel, and so that's it. It's actually kind of a very old school approach to the MIDI in the rig compared to what some people are doing. I know there's guys that are controlling a toaster oven at home with the thing or something,
Yeah, I've heard of composers using it to handle tracking and all sorts of stuff. MIDI, it typically would give me headaches, but ever since I tried the Mastermind, I was able to actually have some fun with it.
Yeah. Well, when we first set up the Mastermind, I set up in a rehearsal studio, and it was myself and John and Matt Picone from Fractal was there. And, so John said, you know what, I want to start over from zero with all my effects. Let's just start from zero and rebuild everything. And then, of course, we had to put that all into the Mastermind, which was still pretty new at the time. So there was a lot of back and forth with Ron, a lot of files being sent back and forth and updates and firmware fixes, and we finally got it all working. And I just said, you know what? I'm not going to touch it. It's working. When I step on that button, it does this, and that's fine. That's all we need. So this year, I had talked to Ron, and I said, I want to start over all the Mastermind programming. I really need to get my hands on this and just wipe it out, rebuild it from nothing, and make it work. So, needless to say, there was some growing pains with myself and the editing software, and there's so many little functionality things that have to be right. Some of it's pretty self-explanatory, and then there's other things where I'd load in a file and go, well, why is it not in remote mode anymore? And I went, oh, I bet you there's a box for that in the editor. So, of course, I go and look and say, oh, yeah, I should check that box. So next time it stays in remote mode. So there was, some back and forth with Ron, and there were some glitches and stuff. But it was really just pilot error on my part of going, oh, when you're putting in a command for this button, it has to go in this order for it to do what we want it to do. So once that was all done and dusted, it's great, So I feel a lot more confident with the programming now. So it's great.
Could you tell us a little bit about your plans to build pedal-based rigs using the PBC, RJ PBC?
Yes. So I feel really bad that Ron and Sherry sent us these units, and we still haven't built anything with them. But I've actually gotten through the planning stage. I know pretty much the one that I'm building for myself. I know pretty much the pedals that'll be on it. For John's, which is pretty much going to mirror what I'm doing. I like a couple of different pedals than he does, but his will basically mimic what his touring rack is doing, but just in a floor-based system. Right. There'd be the usual TC pedals, probably the Eventide H9, which is a really cool pedal. The Dreamscape, of course. And then essentially just take the pedal drawer that's in the touring rig and then stick it on the floor.
Right, and then using the PVC, you guys are able to build those presets out of the pedals.
Exactly.
And
yep.
So for those that don't know, the PVC is a piece of equipment that takes all the ins and outs of the foot switches, the pedals, and organizes them so you can build presets basically to avoid doing the pedal tap dance.
Yep. Yeah. So it's essentially take all of the switching gear that RJM makes, the Mastermind, the Mini Effects gizmo, the Mini Amp gizmo, all that stuff, put it in a floor-based unit, and there you go. Oh, and the Mini Line Mixer. It's got one of those in it too. So
yeah, some great stuff.
So I think we've got a pretty long break over the summer, so I think that's when I'll finally buckle down and done.
Yeah, fantastic. So. Well, earlier I mentioned some fans wrote in questions.
Sure.
Maybe it'd be a good time to open up with the fan question section.
Go ahead, caller.
Let's see. It's funny because I always get a lot of silly ones, like about John Petrucci's beard and like, which switch puts him in kill mode or whatever.
It's a couple pages deep on the Mastermind, but it's there. Don't worry.
Made me sick. So funny.
It actually is.
Let's start off with an easy one. Well, probably not easy. How many guitars does John Petrucci own? Do you know? Does he have all his signature guitars? Like
I have. We even still have at the warehouse one of his very first electric guitars, which I think was an Aria Pro 2, maybe. Yeah. So I think we're in the neighborhood of a little over 200 now, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I need to go back and freshen up the inventory a little bit, but.
You guys have a space like that you keep all the guitars, like a big storage, or?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that's the dream.
Yeah. We have a hermetically sealed bubble. It stays in there. So.
Yeah. Somebody asked, how integral is the Axe effects in the rig?
Hugely integral. Hugely. Aside from the amplifier, it's really it does everything else. Like I said, all the delays, all of the it doesn't use reverb all that much, but there's reverbs, chorusing, harmonizers, the volume. So the volume pedal on the pedal board is actually a controller pedal that controls the volume block in the Axe effects. So instead of running 100 feet of cable there and back with audio, it's just controlling a volume block that turns it up and down. So
perfect.
It's an amazing unit.
And that's essentially what's letting you guys split into stereo, right? All these stereo effects coming out of the Axe effects.
Yep. Yeah. And it makes it easy. So the great thing about the Axe effects, connectivity wise, is it's gotten rid of all the line mixers. It's gotten rid of all the loop. I've got 3 TCM 3000 delay processors. I've got a H7600. I've got a 1210. I've got 6 or 7 different effects processors that I need to be able to turn on and off. So now you have one unit just dedicated to sending audio to the inputs and shutting it off. Then you've got line mixers to sum it all back down, and there's inevitably going to be a grounding problem somewhere.
Right.
So the great thing about the Axe-Fx is it does all that stuff internally, and then you just stereo out. Boom, done.
Yeah, and whenever I hear Petrucci live or in recording, and it's not a doubled guitar, but it's always a very wide, very full image, and so that's obviously letting you guys achieve that kind of goal.
Yeah, definitely running in stereo helps with that.
How long do you usually take to set up guitars? If John gives you a guitar and says set this up.
Depends if we're in the studio or live. Studio, I definitely take a little bit more time because it's a much more microscopic environment. Live, it's sort of, it's sometimes you have to get down and dirty to make something happen. But typically, if I'm changing strings on a guitar after I've set it up, usually about 20 minutes at most. Changing the strings out, tuning it, stretching. Then I let it sit for a while and come back to it. But to take a guitar out of a case, they come from Music Man pretty much set up right where John wants them.
Yeah.
It's usually a truss rod adjustment, maybe adjusting a couple of the bridge saddles to drop it down a tiny bit more. But that's the thing about John. He likes super, super low action.
Yeah.
Doesn't mind a little bit of fret buzz. Some guitar players just go haywire if they hear fret buzz. John's like, I want to play fast.
Yeah.
I want the string to be right there. So
yeah, and you got to last a whole Dream Theater set. Pretty gnarly big set.
That's the other thing too. You get into these 2.5, 3 hour shows like we're doing. That's a lot. That's a lot of playing, and it's you can definitely tell when we start rehearsals to the first week or so of shows. There's a lot of fatigue. A lot of you wouldn't hear it probably in the audience, but I can certainly notice it. But once he gets conditioned, and then he's right in there. So
yeah. How frequently do you guys change strings? That's a question that somebody wrote in.
On the main guitars every day. So on this current tour, I have 3 main guitars. I have a main 6-string, a main 7-string, and a drop D.
Are those all Majesties then?
They are Artisan Majesties.
Okay, yeah.
The slightly different wood combination. But so I change those every day. I have a backup for each one of those guitars that gets done, whether it needs it or not, about every 3rd or 4th show.
Wow.
Time depending, yeah. Knock on wood, I don't really have to go to the backups all that often.
Yeah.
And then we've got a couple of alternate 7-strings. I've got a JP-15 and a JP-16 that we're starting to rotate in a little bit. So it really depends on how much he sweats and what kind of environment we're playing in. So if it's a hot, humid environment, the strings get pretty well wasted.
Yeah.
So the acoustics I do about every 4th show. I'll do them. So
yeah, that's
seem to last.
Yeah, always got to have that fresh, bright tone, huh?
Yeah.
Somebody wanted to know what inspired the decision to make the JP-16 with Floyd Rose and non-piezo.
I think the non-piezo part was just why not? The idea was to come up with a guitar that was just very rock and roll.
Yeah.
I almost want to say like the guitars back in the 80s, man. One pickup, Floyd Rose, go. It's just down and dirty, and it did what you needed. So to put the Floyd Rose on, it was just why not? What else can be done to do something cool? So of course, way back when John was a Floyd Rose user, so put it back on and let's see what happens.
Fun.
So.
Yeah, I saw the guitar at NAMM. It's beautifully put together, just like all the other Music Mans. And
yep.
it did give me that rock and roll feel when I picked it up.
Yeah, it's made to do its thing. You can play it with any genre of music, of course, but it's really in my mind, You know, I like that sort of 80s style guitar, so it's meant for that.
Perfect.
And you know, hopefully guys that would maybe tend to shy away from Music Man guitars or John Petrucci guitars would go, oh, hey, it's got a Floyd Rose on it, let me check it out. You know,
right?
So
yeah. Well, somebody, I don't know if you can answer this one for me, but again, somebody asked if you guys have been experimenting with 8-string at all.
No. No, we have not experimented with 8-string.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm sure at some point it may happen, but it really hasn't been like, hey, I really want to try this. You know, if John wakes up one day and says, I really want to try this, then okay, we'll figure it out. But until then, it's sort of, you know, we're in the album process was almost a year long, and then the tour is going to definitely be over a year long. So
right,
that's the mindset that we're in now. Excuse me.
Well, let's finish it up with a funny question.
Okay.
How does Petrucci maintain that glorious beard of his?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him. I don't really know. I'm sure it's the involved process, though. I actually grew a beard on the first leg of the tour.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I did. I started right when I left home and shaved it off 2 days before I came back home. And yeah, you know, it was something I'd never done that before. It was something different, but not really what I'm into.
More of a Petrucci thing, huh?
Yeah, definitely. It's become its own. It's become its own thing, you know.
Yeah, when I met him in Ammo, I was like, "Dang, this thing's grown!" Like I've never. It's like a totally. It's like a Viking.
Well, I think he had shaved. He had kind of gone back down to a goatee by that point, I think.
Wow.
Because while we were doing the album, I mean, it was the full deal. You know? Yeah, it was pretty epic.
That's great. Thanks so much for talking to me, Maddi, and it's just been a total pleasure. And I hope you guys continue to have a great tour.
Thanks. Look forward to it. Look forward to doing it again.